You're listening to the Codependent Millennial Podcast with Sophie Shilo, episode 42, Terrible Ideas. Hello, my loves. I hope you are all doing so well. I really do. Today we're talking about something so important, how and why your brain tries to hinder you from getting everything you want in life and how to work around it. But first, I want to preface today's conversation with a very loving reminder that we have an incredibly important opportunity right now to show up as loving members of the human race. This opportunity exists for us always, but right now there is such a need for us, especially in the States, to be actively anti-racist, to actively show up for racial justice and the dissolution of the violent system of white supremacy in which we all live. We can show up with our dollars, with our time, our energy, our phone calls, our conversations with friends and family, with the business we support and don't support, with the people we sleep with. Really, there is no corner of your life in which you can't be actively anti-racist. I'm going to share some words now from people that I respect so much. Ashley Nicole Black, AshNB1 on Instagram, says, quote, "There isn't even anything left to say anymore. There is no more raising awareness. Everyone is aware. We simply live in a country that refuses to stop killing its citizens." End quote. YK Hong on Instagram, YK Reborn, writes, quote, "If a person cannot even make the statement that Black Lives Matter or that we must end white supremacy, that person does not believe that Black Lives Matter or that white supremacy should end. What people say, don't say, and say but don't mean means everything." End quote. So that's pretty much my perspective as well. If you're not on board, if you're not committed to anti-racism and showing up for basic human rights in this way, I'm not interested in being your resource for healing your codependency. I would love to invite you to check out my highlight on Instagram about anti-racism and what to say when. But if you've made it this far in life and you still believe that blue lives exist, which they don't, please just remove yourself from my circle. Stop listening to the podcast and go do some work around your empathy and your understanding of white supremacy and racism. Okay, so on to today's topic, terrible ideas. So really, your brain tries to convince you all day, every day, that the things that are best for you are actually terrible ideas. Things like setting a difficult but important boundary, quitting a job, starting a business, applying for a job you're scared of but that you really want, staying in a relationship you want to be in versus leaving or running or escaping, spending money on something that will have a huge payoff or impact in your life, investing in yourself in whatever way you feel called to, taking a trip to somewhere you've always wanted to go, working out, or just starting to move your body more in the morning. All of these are examples of things that really serve us and sometimes that we feel really called to do, but that our brain will offer us so many excuses to try to steer us away from. So the question that comes next really naturally is why? Why does our brain try to convince us that these things that are good for us and that we want are terrible ideas when they're things that really will serve us? We're continuing this discussion from the last episode on overcoming your obstacles to healing, which you should definitely go back and listen to if you haven't yet. So we're continuing that discussion around why we don't do things that we really want to do. What internal blocks do we have that keep us stuck, unhappy, jealous, insecure, guilty, ashamed, essentially codependent? What does it take to overcome these blocks? And how can we be the people we want to be instead of just wishing that we might be able to, one day hopefully be that person? Because that doesn't feel good. To answer this question of why do our brains hold us back, it's because it's our brain's job to assess risk and keep us, quote unquote, safe. It's not our brain's job, hilariously, to help us live our biggest, boldest, most fully realized lives. It's really not. You can train your brain to be more supportive of that, but you have to work with yourself, not against yourself here. Your brain has different sections, of course. One of these parts of your brain, referred to as the primitive brain or your amygdala, your reptile brain, some people call it. It's the oldest part of our entire brain and brainstem. It's, I think, 500,000 years old or something like this. It's the most deeply ingrained. It thinks that development and risk and evolution and big, bold ideas, it thinks all of that is garbage. It's one goal, it's one purpose. The amygdala is, understood to be the fear center of the brain. Its one goal is to keep you alive. And so that very strong, very old part of your brain will try to find all these stories, all these excuses to try to get you to abandon whatever it thinks will result in certain death. And it will interpret any kind of danger as fatal danger, as deathly danger. To keep it a little bit simpler, you might even just be telling yourself something like, I don't want to be disciplined, or I don't want to follow through on my calendar or my schedule or my commitments to myself. And you just believe that outright. You just take those thoughts for granted, like, I just don't want to do that. But when you think that, when you notice the thought, I don't want to, that's always a time to ask what's really going on here. When your brain tells you that you don't want to do something that would directly contribute to your development or your growth or your well-being or your health, it's absolutely something you need to explore. Because what's happening there are these conflicting desires. It's this ambivalence. It's a push and it's a pull. You feel a pull to want to do something in your life, but you also feel this push away towards what your brain considers safe. Again, this is bringing it all back to the amygdala. Letting your decisions driven by fear is when you tell yourself it's a safer decision, quote unquote, to not do whatever it is that you really feel deeply called to do. This looks like sometimes, like I said earlier, sometimes your brain will say, well, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to wake up early. I don't want to spend the time on that. I don't want to spend the energy. This is a safer decision. This is more guaranteed. I just need to think about it some more. Oof, my God, how many times a day do you think that? Like, I just need to think about it. Like, and how many months and sometimes even years could you be holding yourself back from getting what you want because you're telling yourself you don't know or you don't want to do what it takes to get that, or you just have to think about it, or you haven't decided yet, or you're waiting for some magical fairy dust, either guarantee or certainty or external approval or validation from someone else. And it's like, God, like the list is endless. As I'm saying this, I'm like, wow, it goes so deep. And I want you to also be mindful as you're listening to this. Like, I'm sure there are things in your mind that you're popping up thinking like, oh yeah, that's my go-to script. Like, oh yeah, that's what my brain offers me all the time when my brain is trying to dissuade me from pursuing something that I know I really deeply want. So just understand that, when you decide to not go for something, it's not because that's the safer or better or right decision. It's because that's what your scared brain wants. It's the right decision for the part of your brain that has a bias towards negativity and has an aversion to risk, and perceives risk in this extreme way that often is so irrational. It's just really, really, really important. Again, like I said, to work with your brain, not against it. Remember also that your thoughts and your beliefs prove themselves true in your actions and your results. What thoughts do you want to choose to prove true? You actually get to decide, which is crazy to think about. You could prove it true that you weren't capable of doing something you want to do. Not because you aren't capable, but because you told yourself that and you believed it. You proved it true. But you could prove it true that you were capable and that you smashed it out of the park. Not because it's written in the stars and some destiny, whatever bullshit, but like because you told yourself that you were capable and that you were going to do it and you believed it and you did it. Like I said, you get to choose which thoughts and beliefs you prove true in your life. So what have we learned so far? Our brains are always going to tell us that all kinds of things, even wonderful, amazing, exciting things, are terrible ideas. I mean, if we're ever going to think about taking an action that is even slightly out of our comfort zone, our brain is going to offer reasons for us to believe that that given thing is a bad idea and that we should not do it. What I want to tell you, I want to reassure you here, this isn't a problem. I've kind of been talking about it as if it's a problem because I'm like, your brain is holding you back. But the fact that your brain does this isn't a problem. You don't have to get your brain to stop doing that because why? Neuroscience again, you don't have to get your amygdala to stop creating fear stories because your fear doesn't get to dictate your action. Your amygdala doesn't actually have control over your motor function. Unless, of course, you're in a total shutdown response, but we're not talking about that right now. So I'm not going to get sidetracked. I'm going to try to not get sidetracked. Your fear thoughts don't control your decisions. Your prefrontal cortex does. Your prefrontal cortex is this incredible, much newer, shinier part of your brain. I think it's about 200,000 years old as opposed to 500,000 years old. And it's new and it's shiny and it's where our critical thinking happens. It's where our decisions get made. And that's the best news ever because, again, we don't have to get the fear thoughts to stop in order to make decisions, make conscious decisions about things that serve us. We can act in the face of our fear stories. We can act in the face of everything that our brain is trying to convince us not to do. We can choose from our prefrontal cortex, from this more highly evolved section of our brain. How amazing is that, by the way? We can act from this more highly evolved part of our brains in a way that does serve us and that is coming from conscious thought, not from evolutionary primitive fear. I would also encourage you again to look at the ways in which the fearful line of thinking is affecting you negatively in your life, to look at the results that this pattern of thinking is creating for you. And to ask yourself, do you want to continue thinking that way even now as you know that there is another option? What I observe over and over and over again with clients and with myself, let's be honest, because I'm a human with an amygdala, is that when a client is presented with the idea that the way they've been looking at their life and approaching it, the way they've been, thinking about themselves and their own power in their lives, when they know the way they've been doing that is to their own detriment and is at their own expense, it's not that hard to stop doing it. It's not hard to choose another way. When you see ways that you are so clearly holding yourself back, it's not tempting to repeat that behavior. It's really not. It's hard to ignore it from that point on, and it's hard to go back to that way of living. There's only so far you can go, lying to yourself. There's only so much you can lie to yourself about. There's only a certain extent to which you can lie to yourself before it just becomes impossible, not worth it, it's unbearable after a certain amount of time. At that point, it becomes a matter of what you are and are not willing to put up with. And that's an interesting question too. Are you willing to tolerate the mindset that you don't actually deserve to have what you want? Because that's what this comes down to, okay? Yes, you can understand the neuroscience of your brain's bias towards negativity. Yes, you can understand your brain's desire to make excuses so that you don't have to do things that it perceives as risky and dangerous. But this comes down to what you are and are not willing to tolerate. Are you willing to tolerate the mindset that you don't actually deserve to have what you want? Are you willing to tolerate the belief that what you want isn't for you? Hopefully the answer is no, because that's painful. Really, really, really painful to know that you are the one, putting yourself in a cage and you're the one who has the key and you just threw it out of the cage yards away where you can't reach it. Like that's what's happening when you decide that you are going to tolerate believing that you don't deserve what you want. That hurts. Another interesting thing that I want to talk about that our brains do all the time. If your brain does this, you're not special, and that's excellent news. We always think about what we could be risking by taking a leap or a step, by leaving where we are, by leaving what we know behind. And the question that matters more, actually, the question that's way more relevant is, what are you risking by choosing comfort or sameness or familiarity or perceived certainty over what you actually want? What are you risking by choosing to lie to yourself or choosing to continue to ignore your wants, your desires, your gut instincts, your feelings, your intuition? That's where the risk is. And I know we're taught the opposite, so I totally understand if that's where your brain goes. If you focus more on what you risk by taking a step versus focusing more on what you risk by staying the same and not taking that step. But I can speak from experience, personally and also with my clients, that the real risk lies not in daring to go out and to get what you want and to try and to be willing to fail and to all of it. But the real risk lies in you choosing to not pursue those things at all. The real risk lies in you deciding that you're just not worthy of them, that you don't deserve better, or that better isn't available to you. That's a lie. It's a painful lie. The dream you have is available to you. I really need you to hear that. That's the thing that matters most on this episode. And I hope that you reflect on this. I'm not sure what came up for you as you were listening to this episode, as we were talking about this concept of your brain telling you that what you want is a terrible idea. But a situation may have risen to the top of your mind as you listened. And if it did, really think about that in the context of the fact that what you want, you do deserve. And any messages, any conditioning, any old scripts, anything you learned that says that that's not true is not serving you. Listening to your intuition, pursuing big goals, working with your brain instead of against it when you're pursuing all of the things that you want in your life. These are all things that I work with my clients on in the Codependency Cure Mentorship. And we have applications for a new round of that opening soon. Stay tuned. But until then, I want to invite you to get your hands on my free codependency cheat sheet. It is packed with amazing actionable information for you to implement today. You can find that at the link in the description of this episode, or just go to codependentmillennial.com. There will be a pop-up there asking if you want to get the cheat sheet, and just sign up there completely free. It's amazing. You got to get it. Even if you work with me, I would still encourage you to go sign up for it because it's that good. So I hope you guys have a beautiful, beautiful day. I hope that you decide to give yourself some forgiveness, some love, some grace when your brain tells you that what you want is a terrible idea or unavailable to you. And I hope you go and try to get it anyways, because you deserve it and it's waiting for you. It just is. If you liked what you heard in this episode, join me over on Instagram at Codependent Millennial for more tips on how to move beyond codependency and build a life you truly love.